Hi, chaps. I'm going to see if I can resume the rest of chapter 4 for us and chapter 5 before I head off for the beach today. So we're in Genesis chapter 4 and we pick up from where we left off, verse 11. I'm just going to read the rest of that chapter and then I'll just point out one or two salient points in chapter 5 as well once we've gone through that. So Genesis chapter 4, and I'm reading from the New International Version once again. And God says to Cain after Cain has murdered his brother, "Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." But the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, he will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain, so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain lay with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mehujael, and Mehujael was the father of Methushael, and Methushael was the father of Lamech. Lamech married 2 women, one named Ada and the other Zillah. Ada gave birth to Jabal. He was the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. It's a bit confusing, isn't it? He was the father of all who play the harp and flute. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, "Ada and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. Adam lay with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him." Sorry if I was calling Cain Cain, I was slipping over to the French there. Seth also had a son, and he named him Enosh. At that time, men began to call on the name of the Lord. And then to resume chapter 5, we'll go back to it in a minute. We have the first extended genealogy, which interestingly notes the ripe old age of each of we could call them the patriarchs, although that's a name that usually applies to the fathers of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We could call them the patriarchs of the human race. And we note the ripe old age which they all lived to, but we'll return to perhaps look at one or two interesting people there in a minute. As you might expect, as the creation is still what it is, great and good and beautiful, including people, but as the fall has happened, Adam and Eve have turned their back on God. God has chased them from the garden. Cain has killed his brother Abel, as the fall is a big fall, is what I'm getting to, okay? The fall is a big fall. And things are progressively going from bad to worse. So, for example, this descendant of Cain, Lamech, he marries two women. It's legal, I think, so you've got the beginnings of polygamy there. But then his boast is that if my ancestor, Cain, was a baddie, look at me. If Cain is going to be avenged 7 times, although that, of course, was God's promise to Cain, actually, we'll come back to that in a second. But the baddie, Lamech, who's a real gangster, he says, if Cain is going to be avenged 7 times, just look at me. You think my great ancestor Cain was bad? Just look how bad I am. So we are going from bad to worse as we make our way indeed towards the flood and towards Noah. Noah comes at the end of chapter 5. So we're getting there already. And you remember that the flood came in judgment upon a wicked world. Well, Lamech's not doing too bad already by the sounds of it. At the same time, particularly in view of the fact that God gave the law and demanded exacting justice, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, I find it interesting at the outset that although God punishes Cain severely, it can't be put any more severely than Cain himself recognizes that being chased out from the presence of the Lord is the worst thing that could happen to anybody. And that is what happens to him. At the same time, in his mercy, God promises to protect Cain. He puts the famous mark on him, the mark of Cain, which we're not quite sure of, but he does promise to protect him. And we've also got another interesting development here, you see here, the development of civilizations. It seems, as we've got Jabal, who's the father of the nomads, Jubal, who's the Jabal and Jubal. Why did she do that? You might imagine trying to call them in from the field for their tea. But anyway, Jubal was the father of the musicians and Zillah of the ironwork, which unfortunately Lamech seems to have got hold of and made the most of. But yes, you've got the development of civilizations. And interestingly enough as well, even as man and the human race is just falling away from the Lord, at the very end of chapter 4, there is still this, you could look at it from both angles. You could look at it as a wistful note of remembrance. You could look at it as a real note of hope, in that at that time, men began to call on the name of the Lord. Yes, Cain may have been chased out from the presence of the Lord, but men can't stop seeking the Lord. And when we get to the end of chapter 4, just as things are going to pot, we read that at that time, men began to call on the name of the Lord. And I've no doubt, obviously, as we get towards the end of chapter 5, that Noah was one such. In chapter 5, now this is, of course, something which those who love to have a go at Christianity, love to poke fun at the Bible and all the rest of it. They say, oh, well, here's proof that the Bible isn't true. People don't live until they're 900 years old. I grant you, it's quite astonishing. But I've no doubt that there were many astonishing things at the very beginning of the human race. And it's funny, isn't it, how the goal of, or one of the goals of transhumanists through medical and health means and scientific means is that they themselves want to do what they can to make us live forever. I don't know why I've got my glasses on. The human genome, by all accounts, is supposed to keep us going well if we have good health for about 100 years. I was reading a psalm the other day. So again, that's in the Bible, that this psalm says that if we have a good life, we get to 70. And if we have a really good life, we get to our mid-80s or get to our 80s. But we shouldn't necessarily expect to get much beyond that. That's what I read in the Psalms yesterday. Here, people are living until a really ripe old age. But as I said earlier, I mean, I find it interesting. I don't understand. This is what happens sometimes when I read things like this in the Bible. I would not understand the trouble that people went to put together these genealogies, the trouble that they would go to specify these ages. Are they just making them all up? You know, I cannot understand the trouble that is gone to if there isn't some reason for the trouble. And if these are really the great patriarchs of the human race, who for all their waywardness and turning their backs on God, are still the people who have been told to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Then, you know, before the greater onset of disease and all the rest of it, I don't know how old people could have lived to. Apparently to a very ripe old age. But I grant you, I am not one, as you know, for dodging the problems, so-called, that are in the Bible. And I grant you that these ages make your eyes pop out. Noah himself, we are told, was 500 years old when he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But I tell you what's making my eyes pop out at the moment are these transhumanist ideas that the human race has got beyond itself. I think we'll come back to something along these lines in chapter 11 of Genesis with the Tower of Babel, that the human race has got beyond itself and that we think that we can stop disease in its tracks and make ourselves live forever as though we were God. Transhumanism is a reality of our generation, and it's just as crazy, if not more so, as the idea that the Lord God himself could have made people live a bit longer at the start of the human race. Anyway, I'll leave you with those thoughts. The sun is shining, and I'm off to the Gower. Hope you have a great day.